2022 Tennessee rule that requires schools to perform assessments to identify behavioral issues in students with disabilities. Well, that rule could soon be changed.
Yeah, the rule change proposal was made in May, and the Tennessee Department of Education has been receiving feedback from school districts.
Joining us today to talk about her research on this issue is Melissa Brown, Tennessee Bureau Chief for Chalkbeat, a nonprofit education paper. Good publication, lots of good stuff about education. Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, first of all, explain what the current rule states, and then if you could share what the new proposal would change.
Definitely. So the 2022 rule just kind of codifies some requirements in how schools treat and handle students with disabilities. A lot of it is aligned with federal disability education law under the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So this rule change that is being considered by the Tennessee Board of Education doesn't really expressly change anything, but it clarifies existing guidelines that would allow schools to move a student with disabilities to a more, quote, restrictive environment if that student is highly disruptive or displaying dangerous behaviors. They would be allowed to move them to this environment before conducting sort of this kind of intensive formal behavioral assessment. Previously, some schools may have interpreted the law to mean that they could not move this student until they completed this assessment. And so this clarification is sort of allowing perhaps a temporary removal or moving that student temporarily while this formal behavior assessment is completed.
So what circumstances are we talking about for these assessments to happen in the state?
Definitely. So this is for, students who are displaying highly disruptive or dangerous behaviors related to their disabilities. This is a minority of students and a minority of students with disabilities. And so it's a small subgroup within the state. But some disability advocates say that this moving a student should not be used often or without a lot of thought behind it, but sometimes this is necessary for the safety of other students in the classroom, the safety of the student themselves, and to just have the best and most effective learning environment.
Is that why these assessments are important?
Definitely. These assessments called functional behavioral assessments. They're actually required under federal law. And the idea of the protection is to make sure that a student is not permanently removed from a classroom or permanently moved to a different environment without a real understanding of why a student's disability might be manifesting in that way and what could help them be safer and have a more effective school environment. And so under IDEA, the recommendation is to, if there is a recommendation to move a student more permanently to a more restrictive environment, they have to conduct these assessments.
And I understand the state board members who proposed this change had some concerns. Can you talk about some of their concerns?
Right. I think these concerns just kind of popped up in a discussion, concerns that the state does not allow schools to take too long to complete these assessments. They can be quite intensive, and obviously schools have limited resources. And I think there was just concern in making sure that the school completes these assessments in an appropriate time frame, so a student would not be left in a more restrictive environment for too long.
Why are so many folks asking for caution if this moves forward?
I think particularly with dealing with students with disabilities, particularly disability advocates, just want to be sure that there's not knee-jerk reactions when there might be behaviors in the classroom. The goal with a lot of federal disability protections, a lot of advocates, is to educate every student in a classroom with his or her peers and not in we keep saying restrictive environment, but that might be a special education classroom or even a homeschool environment, something like that. So I think ultimately the goal is to have all students safe and happy in a classroom with peers of their age. And so I think disability advocates are just saying this clarification, this rule change might be needed, but schools shouldn't move too quickly to remove a student without proper considerations.
Yeah, research shows it's important for students with disabilities to be educated in a general classroom with their peers. Right. Can you share more about that research with us?
Definitely. I think research shows that outcomes for both a student with disabilities and more typical students in the classroom, outcomes are better. I think when that environment can be achieved, it's definitely preferable. Of course, schools, like I said, have limited resources sometimes, and need more time and resources to be able to accommodate students with different learning needs and different behavioral needs. But I think we do see the research, and advocates in this space really say that it is best for all students to have students with disabilities in a classroom with their peers.
All right, Melissa Brown, the oh-so knowledgeable bureau there, chief at Chalkbeat. Thank you for joining us today and explaining all of this. It's an important topic, and we'll keep an eye on classrooms as this moves forward. Melissa, thank you.
Thank you.